Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney, that's Nick Zararis, and Nick, Peter Laviolette, and Phil Housley are out. We said it at the time, 2 years ago, when it happened, that this hire was uninspired, and here we are.
We knew this was going to happen, and we couldn't get 10 games of Dan Muse or Michael Pekka as the coach. And that's really there's a million things we're going to get to. This is going to be on the longer end of our conversations as far as episode run times go, but it's just another in a long line of, well, this decision doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you knew you were going to get rid of the coach anyway, and you wanted to potentially retain Michael Pekka and Dan Muse to the point that you've told the media, yeah, they're going to interview for jobs on the new staff, why not give them a crack at 10 games and see if that changes the energy around this team at all? Over the last month, more than anything, they needed a firm kick in the butt and hey, it's okay to not win games, but to no-show so many of them and what were ostensibly win some games and maybe you make the playoffs. It's hard for me to care. And I tweeted it 2 weeks ago. I don't really have a lot of empathy for Peter Laviolette. I have a laundry list of complaints over the last 2 seasons. We could talk about the dumb decision of playing Blake Wheeler coming off a broken leg for the first time in 3 months of Game 5 of a conference final against a team significantly faster than you. We could talk about saying, well, yeah, guys don't get better if they sit in the press box and then not playing Zach Jones for 2.5 months. We could talk about
sitting Gabriel Perreault as well for the same
and Brendan Othman and Brett Berard. And we could talk about healthy scratching Kakko. We could talk about healthy scratching Lafreniere last year. There are so many different things we could talk about as far as dumb Peter Laviolette decisions. I don't really have a lot of empathy. I don't think this was his fault that the team entirely unraveled, but he didn't help his own case. At any point between, say, the end of November and last Thursday when the regular season ended, he could have gotten a handle on this. He could have done something meaningful to try and shake things up. And the extent of that was, well, I guess we'll play Zibanejad at the wing as opposed to third line center. That was his idea for shaking things up. It was, well, we got off to a great start this year, and Adam Fox and Keandre Miller are putting together great numbers, but I don't really like this. And Trouba and Ryan Lindgren are getting their skulls caved in. So we need to make 2 bad pairs as opposed to 1 good pair and 1 bad pair. And that's really the story of the Rangers this year. They had ample opportunities to get a handle on it and turn things around, and they just didn't take it. We've made the allusion to this joke like 6 different times, but SpongeBob, Plankton teaching SpongeBob how to be assertive and stand up for himself. No, you can have it. And that was the season. No, Montreal was begging you. Ottawa was begging you. The Islanders, Columbus, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Buffalo, all of these teams stunk. And they were begging you with, a Vezina goalie, a Norris defenseman, multiple point per game forwards, begging you to show anything resembling some intensity, and you just didn't do it.
Peter Laviolette's not the number one reason, bless you, that this is happening, but he's also made the situation worse. He wasn't the cause for the avalanche. However, he didn't really do anything to stop it.
Don't forget the second avalanche.
Yeah, right. There you go. But see, this is how you can tell that we grew up on SpongeBob. But yeah, it's one of those situations where he wasn't the primary cause of why the Rangers collapsed this season. But as you mentioned, he was one of the catalysts to having the biggest problems go on for as long as they did. The biggest highlight recently was the power play. The power play unit was an atrocity on the ice, and yet he continued to trot the same 5 players out there, hoping for the best, changing absolutely nothing, and then just seeing what happens. Breaking news, nothing changed. When, Lafreniere and Zibanejad and Kreider and Trocheck and these guys were stinking up an absolute storm for 3 months, instead of just sitting them or making a statement or holding them accountable or doing something to change up the flow of this team, Peter Laviolette instead changed absolutely nothing, sat Zach Jones for 2 months, because Zach Jones, I don't even know what he could have possibly done at Peter Laviolette, but for reasons unknown, Zach Jones sat in the press box for 2 months to learn and get better, in heavy air quotes, despite, again, Laviolette saying that you don't learn the press box. Okay, whatever. So these decisions all spiral out of control. They all snowball to the result that the Rangers saw. When you don't hold people accountable and you let players get away with not back checking, not skating hard enough, pouting, being, like being upset at, the little things of like, oh, I'm getting 18 minutes of ice time instead of 19 minutes of ice time. Or like, oh, just like little things like that. This is what happens. Now, this is, pouting about little things versus pouting, like Kakko did and DeHaan is doing and, Zach Jones is doing. Like those Jimmy Vesey, those are warranted.
Trouba too. Trouba was bitching about it at the start of the year too, about his role and not feeling, and it's all connected.
If he got traded to Detroit, then there would be none of that. But
the trade that never was going to happen, right?
Right, of course. Like the one that was reported by Emily Kaplan at the draft that it was going to happen that day. Yeah, that one and the same. Like this is what I'm talking about. How if you have underperforming players that are clearly, I don't want to say they're not trying hard enough, but like
what they're trying hard enough isn't good enough.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Like they're not back checking. They're not creating any offensive pressure. They're way too porous defensively. They're not playing at the level that you would expect them to play. By not holding those players accountable, by continuing to give them top 6 minutes, top 9 minutes, whatever it may be, by never scratching them, by always giving them the same amount of ice time, regardless of what they were doing, this is what happens. There was zero accountability from the roster. And roster
there was no
decisions.
Ownership too. There was no ownership of it too, and that's really what irked me down the backstretch.
And at the end of the day, roster, like who is out there on a day-to-day basis is on the coaching staff. Like, yeah, they're whether Drury has opinions about the roster or who he wants to play or whatever, like there might be a small portion of that leads into the whole grand scheme of things, sure. But for the most part, it's on Peter Laviolette to make that call. And by him not making the call, he was therefore saying to everybody, yeah, if you don't backcheck, that's okay. That's fine. That's fine. Because if he really wasn't okay with it, the players that wouldn't backcheck would not be on the ice. By signaling to those players that whatever you do, you get to keep your ice time, he is telling everybody, I don't care what you do. If he cared, they wouldn't be out there. They would skip, they would skip a shift. They would skip a game. Like there would be some sort of repercussion for underperforming in the way that they did. Because there was none of that. Therefore, the signal is fine by me.
And I have a list. I have a few things that stand out as particular points. And this gets back to something I talk about a lot. That the Rangers and Chris Drury at large, they don't just want to win. They want to win their specific way. And it's why they emphasize and harp on certain components, certain ideas. And to start, number one, they come out of the gate 4-1. They win their first 4-5. They win for the first 5. Ryan Lindgren doesn't play those first 5 games. He comes back into the lineup, and he doesn't immediately go back to playing with Adam Fox. But in the first month, from October 9th to November 1st, K'Andre Miller and Adam Fox together, 61% of the scoring chances, 58% of the goals, 66% of the expected goals, 65% of the high danger chances. And that was on 8% shooting, which would lead you to believe they probably could have scored a little bit more. They could have driven a little bit more offense, and on a .902 save percentage. And again, you might be more inclined to say, well, Fox and Miller together, not the most in-zone responsible type of defenseman, not great in front of their own net, going to lose leverage battles, whatever. That balances out the shooting percentage being a little low. Okay, even still, those are dominant first pair numbers. Though unequivocally, those are dominant play driving, controlling the game. When they put Lindgren and Trouba together, 44% of the scoring chances, 46% of the goals, 48% of the expected goals. A weirdly high control of high danger chances, 58%. But again, this starts and comes back to what I had said before. Would you rather have one good pair and one bad pair, or two bad pairs? Because that's what the Rangers' decision was. Would you rather have Fox and Miller dominate their 24, 25 minutes a night, and then you limp through the Trouba Lindgren minutes, and then whatever your third pair is, whether you want to do Jones and Schneider, Vakanainen and Harper. Vakanainen's not on the team yet, but whatever. You get what I'm saying. You have options, and you chose, well, I would rather have two lines, two defensive pairs to try and distribute that risk out a little even more evenly. And the same thing could be said about what they did with the forward group. If you'll recall, Andrew, the Filip Chytil, Kaapo Kakko, Will Cuylle line started the season 15-0. They scored 15 goals before they conceded one against. Dominant 5-on-5 metrics, close to 60% goal share, 60% high danger, 60% scoring chances. Outright dominant. But we had to get Mika Zibanejad going, so we took Cuylle off that line. We put Cuylle with Zibanejad. That sapped the Chytil and Kakko combination. They weren't as dangerous. They didn't have their banger down low that Cuylle plays as. And you made two worse lines. And in trying to distribute the risk throughout that lineup, you weakened your bottom six. It didn't materially change your top six, and all you did was drag down your entire team. And you had this at your disposal, and you actively chose something else because you knew the guys you had weren't good enough. And again, that is an indictment on both the general manager and the coach, because if it was only November and Laviolette's looking around like, well, shit, Lindgren's terrible. I can't play him. But the GM says I have to, so he's got to go with Fox. They got to balance each other out. It's got to be PEMDAS. They got to cancel each other out. Best case scenario, we push for 50% goal share in the Adam Fox, Ryan Lindgren minutes, and we'll figure it out because we're good on special teams. We have a great power play, and if as long as we're between 45 and 50% goal share at 5-on-5, as long as we're great on special teams, that's enough. That's enough. And very slowly that started to break down. They go on the really bad losing streak that starts with the Edmonton game the same day that the reports leak they're going to try and trade Trouba and Kreider. Then you get to the Kakko incident where he says, I haven't been great, but I know I'm not the worst, which he was right about.
He was 100% right about that, yeah.
At any point, they could have sacked Chris Kreider or Mika Zibanejad for stinking it up. But nope, Kakko has to do it. Kakko has to be the one to ride the bench so they could play Edstrom, so they could play Rempe, so they could play any number of guys who aren't materially going to impact anything. And has Kakko been incredible in Seattle? No. He's still an effective play driver and good defensively and something the Rangers could use. I mean, the Rangers have like one right winger you feel reasonably okay about, and that's Lafreniere coming off of like the most disappointing season imaginable. Like, is Brett Berard going to be something? Maybe. Is Matt Rempe something? Probably not. Or one of Othman or Perreault something? I can't tell you because they didn't play.
Hopefully.
Because Peter Laviolette said all we could trust them with was 7 minutes a game. And it all is interconnected. And I really want to emphasize that if you take anything away from this episode, nothing happens for one reason. There are short, medium, and long-term factors that all get you to this point. You can make an argument, this goes back a decade. You can make an argument that the Rangers' inability to evaluate defensemen as long as 10 to 15 years ago is why they have such a terrible defensive group now. Because Chris Drury spent his formative years as a decision maker with Jeff Gordon and Glenn Sather, who not the most successful track record of defensemen. When you look at the guys they acquired, you could look at the Dan Boyle as opposed to Anton Strawman. You could look at going to get Keith Yandel as opposed to just playing someone you had in the organization, going out and trading Derek Stepan just to sign Kevin Shattenkirk, only to buy him out a year later for him to walk on to Tampa Bay and win a Stanley Cup as soon as you bought him out. The laundry list of misevaluations on that back end is why you're at this point. But that's not just the only reason, because then you look at, well, they didn't have a first-line center for 15 years, and Zibanejad was kind of one on a bad team where really high usage, like what Garnett was on the really bad Timberwolves teams, where he would almost average a triple-double, but they would win 35 games every year. That's what Mika Zibanejad was in 2018, 19, and 20. The team wasn't good, but he was putting up, 41 goals in 60 games in 2019, 20. That's pretty good. But once you actually dialed those minutes back, his shooting cooled off a little bit, you saw what he was, which is a good second-line center moonlighting as a first-line center. But all of this is interconnected, and until the Rangers can acknowledge their own shortcomings, they're going to be stuck.
Well, they have to figure out what player evaluation is. And I know that's a big statement to make, but they still don't understand what a good defenseman is.
Nope.
Like, they traded for Borgen and Vakanainen and continue to play those
and
guys.
Soucy. Don't forget Carson Soucy.
And traded away a high third-round pick for Carson Soucy only to sit him because he was so astronomically awful, and continued to play him more for reasons unknown, and continued to sit Calvin DeHaan for reasons unknown. Like, they don't have good player evaluation defensively at all. And forward-wise, you could say the same thing. Like, Zibanejad getting this lifetime extension and stinking it up this season and continuing to get his top 6 minutes despite all of that. How much of that is on Drury? How much of that is on Laviolette? You could split the pie however much you want. The problem is that it's both of their faults. Ultimately, it's Peter Laviolette's fault for continuing to play him at the position that he was, like, even when like Zibanejad was technically a third liner on paper, he would still get more minutes than most forwards on the ice, thereby essentially still making him a top 6 forward when he hasn't been playing like a top 6 forward for the vast majority of the season. This whole experiment, and I'll die, like, this is a hill that I will die on forever. Ever since the Buchnevich trade, the Rangers have tried 35 people
at least
in that first line right winger spot to try to fill that spot that they purposely made by trading away Pavel Buchnevich, and nobody has even come close to the level of play that Buchnevich not only brought for himself but for the rest of that line.
Yes.
Like,
that's been the biggest problem for Zibanejad and Kreider, is that Buchnevich was kind of the engine, that he did the transition stuff. He would be the one who would carry the puck through the neutral zone, and that opens up more space. And because he's both a decent shooter and playmaker, defenses had to respect that, and that opened up space for Zibanejad and Kreider in a way no one else they've had. Like, even the best in the interim has been Vetrano for spurts, and that was just as like a standing stationary, get him the puck and let him rip it type. That's not nearly as dynamic and opportunistic as what somebody like a transition skater like Buchnevich can do.
Well, you had to trade him to sign Barclay Goodrow to a ridiculous contract and Patrick Nemeth to this ridiculous contract. Like, you brought this up. I bring this up. Like, we talk about this, time and time again.
And the team lied about it to everyone's face. That, oh no, we couldn't afford him. He's getting paid $5.8 million, right, and he's put up, I think, 180 points in 3 years as a Blue. Yeah, something like that.
Like, the fact of the matter is that the Rangers did not have to trade Pavel Buchnevich. No matter what other people want to convince you of, the math is the math. Like, the numbers don't lie here. Pavel Buchnevich isn't making $9 million in St. Louis. He's making 5.8, a number that is smaller than Nemeth and Goodrow combined already. Forget about Patrick Reeves. Like, okay, even if you want to give Buchnevich more to kind of offset the tax that comes with being a New Yorker, okay, that's still less. So the Rangers traded Pavel Buchnevich, and they got Sammy Blais, who's not even in the NHL anymore. Also, by the way, they traded him back to St. Louis, but then, of course, scored his first goal of the season against the Rangers because, of course, if you didn't bet on Sammy Blais getting a goal, that's kind of on you, more so than anything else. But the Rangers, since that moment, have tried a million different people, hoping to see if this third line winger that they've acquired can suddenly become a top 6 play driving forward for this team. And newsflash, that's not how this works. Like, we talked about it at last year's trade deadline. If, like, everything was going right for the Rangers within reason, right? Like, obviously Chytil's injury was a big problem, but other than that, everybody was having career years. They were winning all these comeback games. They won the President's Trophy after that. Like, they were really cruising. This was the best case scenario for them to go and acquire a Jake Ensel or another top 6 winger or a top 4 defenseman. Players like, you could have put Trouba on LTIR. Do what Vegas did. You really could have made this a juggernaut team. No, they traded for 2 middle 9 players and then called it a day, and then just assumed things would magically work out.
And I'm glad you said that.
That's not how it works.
I'm glad you said that. It'll magically work out, because I think that's my biggest takeaway over the last week and a half. Because when they fired Laviolette, my instant reaction was, you would have to be genuinely stupid to take this job right now. Because and we said this last when they hired Laviolette, we said this in regards to Knobloch, in regards to Jay Leach, Dave Haxtell. Why would you want this to be your first real job? Spencer Carberry. When the expectations were going to be sky high, the margin for error was pretty much nil. You know, the general manager is trigger happy to fire guys and get the blame off of him as quickly as possible. You know, the organization is not the most stable. The roster is not great. The ways to improve the roster are not obvious or straightforward. And by and large, you have credibility issues where nobody really believes anything the team says if you have any critical thinking skills. And you're supposed to walk in here and meaningfully change things. And this is your first NHL job? Like, how could you possibly be set up for success? Like, even if you go, and we'll talk about coaching ideas later, and I had somebody reply to me, "You're crazy. This is the Rangers." And I thought about that for a second, and I said, what exactly does that mean? Right. The Rangers have won one Stanley Cup since America entered World War II. 3 of the 4 cups this franchise has won are the original 6 era, which, if we're being real, those should count as halves, not fulls. And if we're going to say a team that's won one Stanley Cup since 1940 is going to figure it out just because they're the Rangers, this is a great job. Who wouldn't want it? That's the problem. And we could talk about this in terms of all of these things that have gone wrong for the Rangers over the last 10 to 15 years. You want to know why? Kakko, Lafreniere, Chytil to some extent, Vitaly Kravtsov, Nils Lundqvist, K'Andre Miller. You know why all these young guys have hit plateaus?
And Anderson as well.
Yeah, Elias Anderson. Yeah, all of these guys hit walls because the Rangers didn't put the work into their development. They just said they'll figure it out because we're the Rangers. They're going to go to Hartford, which we've never put money or effort into being good at any particular level. They're going to go there. They're going to play half a season or a full season there. And then we're going to bring them up. And we're not going to have any plan for them to be successful at the NHL level. We're going to play Vitaly Kravtsov with Kevin Rooney and Ryan Reeves opening night. And we're going to wonder why he wants to go back to Russia or he wants to leave. We're going to play Elias Anderson 11 minutes a night on the third line. Oh, yeah, and he's playing with 2 broken feet. And he may or may not have issues with people in the locker room. Oh, and we're going to go out and get known dickheads like Brendan Lemieux and Tony DeAngelo and wonder why some of the guys aren't exactly in the best of moods. Oh, but we're the Rangers, so this is going to work out. The Rangers need to stop acting like they're the Yankees. The Yankees can get away with doing we're the Yankees. We'll figure it out. Because they've won the 27 World Series and they have 5 of the 15 greatest players in the history of baseball. The Rangers are not this decorated, accomplished franchise. You look at those banners, they're pretty old. Yeah, great. You won the President's Trophy twice this century. That's great. You retired.
Super cool. Is there a parade for that? Do you know what time the parade for President's Trophies are?
That's an email. Winning the President's Trophy is
not even a Zoom, not even a meeting. It's an email.
No, it's an email. And that's my issue. Because the Rangers keep acting like no matter what they do, it's going to work. You know, bringing in Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko to a team that couldn't play defense was the most hubris, egotistical bullshit I have ever seen. Having people call that a super team and eating the cheese on a guy playing with one hip and a guy who was 32 years old in Tarasenko and expecting it to work out against a faster and more skilled team is the epitome of we're the Rangers. It'll work out. Of course we'll beat the Devils. They're our little brother. We always beat them. Sure. But when you actually have to go out there and play with results and not aura, it's great. The building is loud. It's great. It's the world's most famous arena. What does that mean in terms of winning hockey games? What does that mean, Chris Drury? You know, I saw the clip. Someone tweeted it the other day of him scoring that goal on the Sabres against the Rangers with like 8 seconds left. I think it was 08 or 09, 07 or 08, whichever one of those years. And I was thinking to myself, they signed him. He played 2.5 seasons here. And in those 2.5 seasons, he somehow made James Dolan love him because there's no like discernible reason. There should be some heat. And like every single report is, oh no, he's got the full commitment of ownership. Like what? What
Mr.
about
D, by the way, not Mr. Dolan, Mr. D.
What somebody said this is a joke, but like it should have been a major red flag that Chris Drury, who isn't Italian, owns a chain of Italian restaurants. Like that's a major red flag as far as character. Imagine having the hubris to think you can run an Italian restaurant not being Italian. Preposterous. There are so many of these like red flags, and like we're going to talk about the Panarin situation, the Panarin settlement in the context of this too, because that's tied to this too. The idea of accountability and well, we're the Rangers, so no one will ever find out, and we're going to make it go away, and the problem's gone, and that's the end of it. Oh, we're going to make the social media manager's job impossible now, as opposed to trying to fix this. And well, we're the Rangers. We don't need a social media team. The tickets sell themselves. Why do we need a social media presence? We don't. We're going to post grainy security footage of them walking in. We're going to set up a camera before they walk in. We're going to go in an entirely different room, wait for everyone to walk through, wait for everyone to go through, go into the locker room, go get the camera, go edit, go upload, because we're the Rangers. We don't need it. No matter what. Even when the Rangers were hot ass in 2018, 2017, 2019, the building was still full. It does not matter. And that's why they get away with this. And that's the most galling part of this. It's the same thing with when the Knicks were in that dark spell for a while. If the building's full, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. And that's the thing. And then you have the stubborn Ranger fans who are like, well, I got to support the team. If you stop supporting the team, it might get better. That's the way you have to think about this. It's, well, you're not a real fan. You're not loyal. Why are you being loyal to something that doesn't give you anything back? That's organized religion. If you want to talk about waiting for eventual payoff, you could talk about Jesus coming back today, for that matter. The Rangers are not coming back on the third day. I hate to tell you, their season's over.
It's like being a big supporter of the pizza store down the street, but then they stop making good pizza, but you continue to buy the pizza and eat the pizza, even though you hate how the pizza tastes now, because you're a bad fan if you don't eat the pizza. It's like the product is bad. You don't have to buy the product if it's bad. If you don't like the product, you can make your voice heard and be like, hey, this product used to be good. I don't know what the hell happened, but it's bad now. So I don't want to give you money for it anymore because it tastes bad. And there are people that are in your mentions, in my mentions all of the time being like, how could you not buy the product even if it's bad? You should support the brand. It's like, but we want it to be better. It's the meme of we should improve society somewhat.
But you participate
in it. Curious. It's like, yeah, we want it to be better. This is the whole point of the show.
Yes.
The whole point of the show is to be like, hey, this is going well. This is not going well. Here's how we get it to be over here into the good side. That's the whole point of the show. Like, and so many people are all in on the good and continue to ignore everything else. And like, you can fan however you want to fan. I'm not here to tell you how to be a fan, but you also can't yell at us for highlighting obvious issues that we would like to be addressed and fixed and improved. Like this is the whole point. And by the way, like that mentality of, oh, everything's going to be all right, it'll fix itself. That's how they got here.
Yes.
This is the problem. By like if you have a broken leg and you just continue to walk on it and ignore the problem, guess what? It's gonna get worse. The leg isn't gonna heal itself. Like when you have, a medical issue, or if you get sick and you don't treat it, it gets worse. It's like, yeah, you kind of have to deal with the problem if you want to get better. Right now, we have a problem. People are choosing to ignore it. And now it's become a worse problem. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, how did we get here?
I mean,
but your leg is falling off, dog. What do you mean? How are you gonna run a marathon? Your leg is falling off. How are you lined up to run this marathon? Like you can barely walk. Talking about.
I feel like that gif of the penguin smoking a cigarette, shaking his head, because that's how I feel about the last 2.5, 3 years. The recipe for the Rangers has been dominant special teams, survive at 5-on-5, elite goaltending. They had above average, but not elite goaltending, terrible power play, good penalty kill, atrocious 5-on-5. No shit, it fell apart.
Too.
No shit, it fell apart. It was tenuous to begin with. And then one part fell and the entire bottom fell out. And you look at this and people will say, well, how can you say that? They won the President's Trophy. They went to 2 conference finals. Yes, in a very difficult way. You know it can be easy, right? Do you watch the Avalanche play hockey? Do you watch the Golden Knights play hockey? You know, teams that meticulously look it up and down. The Avalanche overhauled like half their roster in the middle of this season.
They traded Mikko Rantanen.
Because Chris McFarland was looking around like, this isn't good enough. We need to be better. You look at the way Vegas has assaulted their roster in terms of trying to get better at every conceivable way. They had Pavel Dorofeyev score 30 goals for them this year. That's a guy who was playing like 11 minutes a night for most of his NHL career. They've turned Brett Howden into a 45, 50-point forward, playing 14, 15 minutes a night. And this gets to something the Rangers have always been terrible with, and that's evaluating their own guys. Because not only do the Rangers misevaluate other teams, they misevaluate their own guys to the degree that things that are reported after the fact sound insane. Like rereading reports from earlier this year when they were in that pursuit of JT Miller and being like, yeah, they could have had JT Miller in 2021, but they didn't want to trade Braden Schneider. Like reading that now is like bang your head off the desk levels of stupid. They drafted like 15 defensemen in the first 4 rounds of the draft in a 5-year window. They have one that's like maybe good in Keandre Miller, and he's not good enough to like feel good about that. What about the 40 games of Braden Schneider you saw in Hartford was like, nah, we don't want JT Miller. We can't do that. We can't trade Braden Schneider because we think Braden Schneider's great because we want to win our way. It's not because we think he's great. We think he plays the way we want to play. And again, it's not about winning. It's about playing the way we want to. It's why we have to entertain another year of this Matt Rempe stuff. It's why Sarah Palin's tweeting about Matt Rempe, because it doesn't matter about winning. It's about, well, he plays hard. The amount of times I read, well, he tries hard. If the threshold for trying hard is what we're building a team around, great. We're going to win 10 games because Matt Rempe trying his ass off doesn't mean a whole lot. He is not capable of
sign me. I'll try hard.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean I'm good at what I'm going to do at a professional level. Like I will try my heart out, but I'm not an NHL player. So what difference does that make?
And that's the thing that's so galling about this. They have successfully suckered people into believing this bullshit that, oh, he tries so hard. He's there every day after practice working on his hands, working on his game.
And Matt Rempe has gotten a lot better.
He has.
I'm like, no,
the coach still won't play him more than 10 minutes a game. So what does it matter? If you can't be trusted to play more than 10 minutes in a game, what does it matter? If you only play 9-10 minutes a game, you don't matter. There are more impactful guys. You cannot with a straight face tell me you would rather play Matt Rempe or Brett Berard. If that was the dichotomy, if it was one or the other, you could play Rempe or Berard. If you told me you would rather play Rempe over Berard, I would not take your opinion seriously because you wouldn't be talking about hockey. You would be talking about, well, he checks people. Yeah, he also takes the most penalties per 60 of anyone in the entire NHL, and he plays 9 minutes a game. At some point, there needs to be an adult in the room. Speaking of adults in the room, did you see the reports that James Dolan might sit in on the exit interviews? First of all, if I asked you, Andrew, how many games do you think James Dolan watched this year, in person or on TV? What would you ballpark?
I don't want to answer this question.
I would conservatively say between 5 and 10. I think between 5 and 10. I'm guessing. Again, I don't know. I would say watching either in person or on TV, 5 to 10. You know, he's busy. JD in the straight shot, the Sphere, got a lot going. The Knicks. I'd be a lot lot more inclined to be
Game
going.
One, by the way. Hey, I'm wearing the playoff shirt from last night. Hey, they won. That was a great game. MSG was rocking.
And it's nice when MSG's rocking and the team is good and the team is likable. You know, last year's Knicks were one of the most likable teams of any New York sports team in a long time, because they tried their asses off and they were good. You know, it's really funny how that can buy you some leeway, buy you some credibility. But as far as the next phase of where we're going, I think we're going to pivot real quick. We're going to talk about the Panarin allegations, the Panarin settlements, because that's tied into what we're talking to as well. And then we'll wrap up today's show talking about just where they go from here. So the cliff notes, the synopsis, even if you don't want to get into the specificities and the accountability and the mistakes here in this process, more than anything, this is a reflection on the Rangers' inability to hold anyone accountable for anything. Even if you want to say, oh, well, it's a settlement, that's not an admission of wrongdoing. Okay, sure. They still made the replacement's job impossible to do, as opposed to putting new parameters in place. You know, when you have something like that happen, and there were reports that the Rangers did commission a law firm to do an investigation, whatever, but doing an investigation without corrective policy only creates the environment for it to happen again. And this is the root of the issue. Because again, even if you don't want to get into the specificities of this case, the framework, the parameters, that's a reflection on leadership, because the general manager and the owner absolutely signed off on that settlement because the team also paid out a settlement. And even if you want to say, well, they found out way after the fact, you know, several months later, okay, that doesn't mean you don't do anything. Because it was very funny reading the token cliff note in the reports. The NHL and the Rangers declined to say if Panarin was disciplined in any way. Well, he wasn't. Okay, he wrote a check. If you can write a check to make the problem go away, you weren't punished. When you make $11.5 million a year, writing a check to make a problem go away is not discipline. And even if you want to be the most charitable person you should be in this case, which you shouldn't be, that's not running a ship. That's not running an accountable workplace. That is not a healthy that is not a healthy environment where people can be successful. Because if they can just make things go away like that, where they just write a check, they can do that to anyone. And I feel like that should be starting to sink in more and more, even if you read the news badly as of late. Just because it hasn't happened to you yet doesn't mean it won't. So at some point, and we know James Dolan is very
what's the quote that like, oh, I didn't say anything when they went after X group of people.
Yeah. First they came for the socialists. Right. Then they came
after me, and there was no one else to say anything because everybody was gone. It's like it's the same point.
And again, we're talking about accountability, and the whole season, no one was held accountable. Well, look at how the general manager handled like a real life crisis. They immediately tried to make it go away. They didn't tell anyone. No one was held accountable. If they won't do that, where they're like improprieties and like paying out financial settlements, no shit, they're not going to do it when someone doesn't back check. If you can get away with that, what's hockey matter? And that gets to the root of all of these issues. They don't really care. They want to do things their way because they think their way is the best. And look, I have long held, I didn't think Chris Drury was a particularly good leader. I think even dating back to the Kravtsov stuff, I think the way they've handled certain things here have been atrocious, but this only reinforces that. And that's to say nothing of like the moral and like the character aspect of this, where it's like, if that was my ship, I would have looked into voiding that contract for the morals clause that every one of these professional athletes have. Because if you can win, great, but win at what cost? Like, how are people supposed to work there and feel safe and feel like they can do a good job if the GM can just disappear you?
Yeah, the whole situation is, I mean, complicated. It's a very easy way to say. It's a very TLDR way to saying that. But yeah, a lot of the details also are shrouded in secrecy. So it's just like this whole thing is very just strange, for lack of a better way to say that. Like, you know, it would have probably been in the Rangers' best to come out with this as soon as it happened, be like, hey, this is what happened. This is how we dealt with it. This is the discipline, and this is how we're going to move on. If that happened, like, there would have been a lot more accountability, and this wouldn't have to happen. If there was just transparency with, okay, X, Y, and like to the fullest extent of cooperation within the public sphere, this is what happened. This is how we are going to fix it moving forward. This is how we dealt with it, and this is how we make sure it doesn't happen again. That's all the Rangers needed to do in the situation, in that moment. That's not what they did, and clearly now it's more, like you said, if you zoom out a little bit, it's more so, if they do that with serious allegations, and again, there was a settlement, which is not admission of guilt, whatever, we probably won't know the actual details of what happened for a very long time, if not ever. So I don't want to speculate on those things, but in particular, however, this not only did happen, clearly there was a settlement, but like Dolan was involved, Drury was involved. The team organization had to pay out money. So everybody knew about this. And the fact that, everybody in the Rangers knew about it, and there was no like, hey, this happened, and this is what we're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again from a public standpoint, because it was going to get out eventually. Somebody was going to say something, and like that and this was going to come out at some point, whether that be now or 10 years from now or what. Like, eventually this story was going to come out. So it's probably best, and now I'm not a PR expert, I don't work in PR, I don't know, but to my understanding, it is in your best interest to get ahead of these things and be like, hey, be as, like I said, be as transparent as possible, admit that something happened, regardless of what it is, because there was a settlement. Be like, hey, this statement, like, it's going to be for the Rangers. They obviously want to skirt as many details as they want / can / legally, whatever. And this is what we're going to do as an organization to make sure this doesn't happen again, improve the future relationships within the organization, etc., whatever. They didn't do that, and now that inevitably the story has gotten out to the public, it makes it look a lot worse. The situation was bad to begin with. I want to preface that, but now that it's come out that they essentially weren't very open about what happened, that in and of itself makes it worse than if they were to just come out and be like, hey, like, yeah, this happened, here's how we're going to fix it.
Because that's the thing. Because unfortunately, bad things do happen. But as a public-facing company that largely plays on public trust, you need to earn that trust. And for too long, the Rangers have just expected that trust. And it's crazy to me we're sitting here, 3-4 days after that news broke, and there's not even like a quiet murmur of, well, maybe this changes things as far as if Drury keeps the job or not. Because the owner's okay with it. The owner was a party to agreeing to that settlement at some level. They made it go away, and the Rangers are going to go back to business as usual. And that's the thing here. I mean, you saw it in what Panarin said on Thursday. Was there any thought you weren't going to play? Why? Because of what's happening? No. And that was the end of it. And by the end of next week, the beats will be back to, well, who's going to be the new head coach? And is it going to be Joel Quenneville? Is it going to be Jay Woodcroft? Is it going to be Mike Babcock? Who are they going to bring in here? And there's no evidence that anything is materially changing other than that some poor employee who's making $45,000 a year that's expected to live in the 5 boroughs has to do a really difficult job for no money and really not do a great job because the team would rather do that as opposed to meaningfully change and improve the environment. And again, it's all interconnected. If they can't hold people accountable for real life consequences, why would they bother with hockey? Because it's not about holding people accountable. It's about holding people accountable in their way. You know why Chris Drury yells at a 19-year-old during a practice? Because he wants to feel big and strong. He wants to be, oh, how could you quit on your team? You're such a quitter. Bro, you gave up on hockey because your knee gave out. If anyone should understand, it should be you. That sometimes it's not in your control. Sometimes it isn't working. And it's just crazy to me. We're sitting here and the conversation's already over. That news broke, the playoffs started, and that was it. There is no ongoing. They briefly alluded to it on 32 Thoughts yesterday, but they talked about it for a minute and a half, and that was the end of it.
Well, the insiders just retweeted it and moved on about their day. I haven't checked Peter Laviolette's Twitter because I do not follow that man, but I don't think he ever shared or said anything about that at all. So, but he's too busy, hugging Cash Patel or whatever. So who cares?
Again, it's really difficult because these are people in positions of extreme authority who have the power to do the right thing, and they are actively choosing not to do the right thing. And it's not even a conversation. We know Panarin will be on the team next year, because if they didn't want him to, if they actually cared about this, he wouldn't have been on the team this year. They would have made him go away. Like, even if they didn't report this, even if they didn't do an admission or write up a statement, they would have traded him. They would have been like, where do you want to go? We don't really want you here anymore. You're going to get paid out. We'll keep this quiet and you'll go away. But no, they want him on the team. And again, it becomes increasingly harder to justify getting this riled up, to care this much, because they don't care about winning. If they don't care about winning, they don't care about doing the right thing. It was really funny reading a bunch of comments over the last few weeks of people being like, at least the season ticket prices didn't go up because they didn't make the playoffs. Like, why are we happy? Why is that like a settlement? Like, that should be the expectation, that the season ticket prices shouldn't go up every single year, even if they do make the playoffs. It's ridiculous what they are asking people to fork over to go to games. The team stinks. And it's okay. We're the Rangers. We'll figure it out. In a week or two, it'll be, who are they going to get in here to be the new coach? And we could start talking about that now. But does it matter when 5 of the 6 defensemen are locked in? You're going to have Zibanejad, Trocheck, JT Miller, and probably not Kreider, but okay, you need another top 6 winger then. Where are you supposed to get another top 6 winger? You have $9 million in cap space. You need to pay K'Andre Miller and Will Cuylle, or get replacement. The path forward here is not great. There is no slam dunk solution, and anyone who's insinuating, like, even if you got your first choice, if you got David Carl or you got, Mike Sullivan, okay, is that going to make Trocheck play defense? Probably not.
The conversation with the head coach starts with accountability, and that's yep. The number one thing here with the with the new head coach, the Rangers, is regardless of the system that you want to put in place. We have seen over the past 2 seasons, I mean, this season, obviously, in particular, there's been a complete lack of accountability from the head coach to play the players that deserve the ice time and sit the players that don't. The number one thing that, whether that be Chris Drury, or let's just say Chris Drury gets removed and somebody else gets the GM job, I don't know that. I'm just saying words out loud. Their number one priority when they look at a head coach is, are you going to hold your players accountable? If Lafreniere isn't going to back check, are you going to sit him? If Zibanejad continues to skate around doing cardio for 20 minutes and not contribute to anything, and then go in the locker room after the game and say the effort wasn't there or whatever, are you going to sit him? If K'Andre Miller gives up another heinous giveaway in the defensive zone that just gives the puck to their team, and then they score, in overtime to win the game, like they did again, I think it was Ottawa. Like, are you going to sit him? Because if the answer is no, thank you, but no thank you, we'll look elsewhere. That's gotta be, it doesn't matter who it is. If David Carl, for how great of a coach he is, isn't going to keep his players accountable, I do not want David Carl to be here. But if he will, then I would love David Carl to be here. And I would imagine that he will, because, I mean, you don't win in every step of the way if you don't hold your players accountable. So I would imagine that he is a guy that would. For everybody else, I don't know what the answer is. Would Jay Woodcroft do that here? Would Jay Leach do that here? I have no idea. But that's got to be the top of your priority. And then after that, once the answer is yes to that question, then you can talk about, okay, what's your system? How would you change? How would you fix that? How would you change this? What player would you want in this role? Then you can go down the list and see which coach best fits this particular situation. But if you don't address number 1, I don't care about number 6. That the number 1 is the title here. If you don't answer the title, it doesn't really matter what the headers, like the footnote says.
So I wanted to tie something into this that we brought up earlier, but it really hit me as you were just talking there. You need to hold people accountable so that people give you credibility. The problem for the Rangers this year is because guys weren't held accountable, it made what Peter Laviolette was saying less credible. If Panarin's not going to be held to the standard of back-checking, if Trocheck, if Zibanejad, Kreider, etc., why am I going to bust my ass? The team sucks anyway. If the best players and the most expensive players on this team aren't doing their best, why should I? And people will be like, well, you're professional, blah, blah, blah. You go to work. You see the people you work with. Not everybody's pulling their weight at work, but you suck it up because that's what you're supposed to do because you're a professional. But it reaches a tipping point where if no one has any credibility, no one gives a shit. Yeah, you heard what Kakko said. I haven't been great, but I'm not the worst. He's right, and he should say it. And if you can't hold people accountable, it takes away your credibility as a leader, as somebody who has to make those difficult decisions. You can make an argument that goes all the way up to the ownership as far as holding people accountable, where you look around at this team right now, and if you think the coach is the bigger issue than the roster and who put the roster together, I think you're missing the fort. I don't think you understand what the problem is here. And when you don't have accountability, it makes you lose credibility. You think about how they tried to walk back the Trouba thing, where they very clearly were trying to trade him. Trouba told them, no, I have no trade protection. I'm not going to any of the teams you could trade me to, and you're going to deal with it. And the Rangers lied about it. They had no credibility. And then they all tried to pretend, oh, no, there was no trade. It was never close. It was never going to happen. And then we had to all pretend that it wasn't going to happen. A month and a half, 2 months into the season go by. Trouba's dragging ass so badly that, hey, well, now we have an excuse to get rid of him because he's atrocious. And from there on, you think, well, if nobody has any accountability anywhere and nobody's credible, this entire thing is a farce. The entire organization is a one big charade where no one gets held accountable. We all talk in platitudes about how we want to try harder. We need to do better. And nothing ever changes. And that's why this season has been one long wet fart, because no one cared. No one cared. And you can, as much as people want to talk about, oh, the performance, blah, 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 all it took was one guy. And anytime anyone spoke out, they were immediately reprimanded. Kakko got sent to Seattle. Calvin DeHaan had to speak to the thought police. The minute you speak out, you're gone. You're gone.
Yeah, it goes back to, the reports that Drury has become increasingly paranoid about everything since he's taken over the GM job specifically, where, he's very afraid of what is going on at all times. He wants to be on top of every little thing. And that makes people nervous. And that, I haven't spoken to Chris Drury. I don't know how true these statements are in relation to how he feels, but you take one look around this team and everyone's like, everyone's afraid. Like everyone's like looking around. Everyone's like kind of, not sure about where they want to be, if they're going to say the right thing. Everyone's like walking on eggshells. And I hate to break it to people, but when was the last time any team ever was walking on eggshells and then won the championship in the same season, or even got remotely close to that? Let's just say, like, that doesn't happen. The team that plays the best, the team that feels the freest to play their game, is usually the team that wins, or at least gets close. This team not only does not feel free to move about, but on top of that, like you said, the people at work that get paid the most amount of money aren't working to that extent. So why should everybody else?
It's really frustrating and it's really befuddling because at a certain point, what is the point? We're going to run this back. We're going to be looking at JT Miller and Trocheck down the middle because those are Drury's boys. Zibanejad will be playing right wing. It'll be a bunch of 30 to 40 point young guys filling out the rest of the lineup. The defense is still going to be bad on paper, and you're going to hope the new coach can implement a defensive structure to make the team a little bit better. And that's supposed to sell me on they can win a Stanley Cup? Like, come on. And that's why, as much as people want to talk, but the roster, well, who picks the roster? Who picks the roster? And if we're talking to Mr. D, it sounds like we're doing another year of this.
Yeah, if I was Jim Dolan, I would remove Chris Drury. I would. But the question is like, okay, well, you can fire Chris Drury. That's fine, and that would probably ultimately be in the Rangers' best, moving forward. But you have to replace him. And that's where things get difficult, at least for me personally, because I don't.
Leon Rose can do both.
Listen, I would love for. Hey, Leon, do you need someone to explain hockey to you? Because here you go. But the question that I have to ask myself, and I could ask you, I could ask anybody, is okay. Well, if you remove Chris Drury, then who would be the best option to replace him? And I don't have a name off the top of my head. Like, I'm sure there are plenty of really good AGMs or up and coming talents that could do a great job as general manager. I don't know those names. And again, like, to be as transparent with everyone listening as possible and watching and out there, I'm saying to you directly, I don't know, because it's okay to say I don't know about things. You don't have to be an expert about everything. I don't know who the next GM would be if they remove Chris Drury, who the names would be. For coaching, it's a little bit easier. Like David Carl is an easy answer. Maybe somebody like Jay Leach or assistant coach that hasn't had that opportunity yet. Maybe they could do it. Maybe a different college coach that I'm not thinking about could also could also make that jump. Sure. Who the next general manager could be if Chris Drury gets removed, I couldn't possibly tell you, because I don't have enough intel about assistant GMs or the third man up in the Buffalo Sabres or the I don't even know, like the Ottawa Senators, or like, I don't know. So that answer becomes a lot more difficult. However, I would start the search now. That's what I would do.
Number one, I think the Rangers would greatly benefit from president and GM being two different people. I think those are two different jobs. The responsibilities of one are not always in a line with another. I think there's a reason those are two separate jobs now. I think it's the same exact reason coaches aren't GMs anymore. I think the responsibilities are too much. I think it can create these kinds of situations where you really insulate yourself and you're very untrustworthy. And like Molly told us when she was on the show last year, Chris Drury has his like 3 guys, and those are the only 3 guys he talks to. And that's not a very great work environment. Like, don't you want as much information as you possibly can get, as opposed to just confirming what you already kind of thought? It's really annoying, because there is no recourse here. You can't fire the owner. You can't fire the president of hockey operations, because if he's got the owner's ear, that's it. That's the end of the discussion. The owner picks that. It's not the same as with a coach, where you can mount enough public opinion to get a coach fired. It just doesn't work to that degree the higher up the food chain you go. And that's why this is all so disheartening, that, a year ago it was, well, they're right here. They're one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the league. If things break right, they can do this. We are 10 months removed from that. And can they even make the playoffs next year? And like, even if they do, are they going to be able to do anything when they get there?
A potential name for GM could be Steve Valiquette, honestly.
I think you need more direct experience
potentially
first.
And again, like, this is just I'm trying to think of names that could tangibly improve the Rangers. That
hire the evolving Wild Twins for $500,000 a year.
Things once a year.
Yeah, just to say no to things. Just to say no. Right, not even to pick players. Just be like, should we do this? No.
It's one thing to have experience, but it's another thing to also understand the deep-rooted issues with this roster. And I say Steve Valiquette only because, like, not only is he, with the team every game, but also he very clearly understands the positives and the negatives surrounding the players on the roster. So if nothing else, even if he doesn't have the general manager experience, I feel like his opinions about shaping what this roster should look like would be a step in the right direction. I don't even know if Steve Valiquette wants the job. I have no idea, but it's a name that I come up with. Maybe Brian Boyle wants to do. Like, I don't know. I have no idea. But Steve Valiquette, given his view not only on the game but on this roster specifically, his analytics are very. I love ClearSight analytics. I'm a big fan of like the tools that he uses. I like. Of all the names that you can give me, Mark Messier should be the GM. I'm kidding. Please. I'm not manifesting that, I promise. But of all the names that could be the GM, Steve Valiquette's not the worst name, out there. And again, like if the Rangers should split president and GM into two different jobs. Absolutely. But now the question becomes, okay, well, who are you going to replace Chris Drury with? Now that becomes, okay, well, who's going to be replacing Chris Drury to be the GM? Also, who are you hiring to be president? Because now that one difficult question becomes two. Which, by the way, probably it should be answered. That's like difficult decisions have to be made. These are things that should be addressed. And you're right. President and GM should be two different jobs. However, as it currently stands, we have one difficult question of who's replacing Drury to be president/GM. Splitting that apart splits the question.
Because they need to be, because the responsibilities are different. Like fundamentally, those are two different jobs. And there's a reason good teams don't do that. You got to start modeling things on what good teams are doing as opposed to what were the Rangers, because that hasn't worked. Just assuming, we're going to get the great player because we got Mark Messier 30 years ago. Great. Do you really think you're going to get Jack Eichel? Do you really think you're going to get Jack Eichel? Because if that's your gambit, he's going to be 31. Okay. You got two cracks at it. Maybe. And you get to kick the can down the road again. And it's, can we get Connor Bedard?
Connor McDavid, baby. He's going to be a Ranger. Yeah. When he's like 36, probably. But,
more likely than not, it's not out of the question. I'm kind of at a loss at this point, man. I don't know how you look at this and you think the GM is doing a good job and you think he should get another chance at this. I mean, he's had 3 different head coaches now in 4 years. I mean, someone like Jim Nill, who's been with the Stars since I think 2011 or 12, has hired 4 coaches in 10 years. And some of that is smaller markets. They're less inclined to fire coaches. They don't want to spend the money to have guys not coach. But if you're just going to keep firing guys after 2 years and you're not going to meaningfully change the roster, how do you expect a different outcome? It just is not congruous with logic. And unfortunately, we traverse in an anti-logic and an anti what's the word I'm looking for? An anti-intellectual. There we go. An anti-intellectual world, because it's about feelings. It's about, he tries hard. That's all you can ask. If he tries hard. Is he? I can't, man. I'm so done. I'm just so done.
I, for one, would like to see results over how hard somebody tries. Preferably both happen at the same time. You would think that if somebody has good results, I mean, they're trying hard. I feel like the default is players are trying hard. Because that's the thing too, is if you have to question how hard someone is trying, whether that be in professional sports or at your job or at the gym or whatever, then you have bigger problems than that. If you're not, the default should be that you are trying hard. You shouldn't get brownie points for having effort at something that you are actively trying to do. I'm at the, I worked out yesterday. I'm not getting brownie points for getting a sweat in, for, lifting and getting, and doing my routine. Yesterday I woke up at 5 a.m. I did a full show, did social stuff, worked out, went to the Knicks game, as media, did all that, got home at midnight. It was a whole day. I don't get brownie points for that. No one's throwing me a parade.
That's the Chris Rock joke. Why you want credit for shit you're supposed to do?
No one's giving me a parade. I haven't gotten a letter. I haven't gotten a knock on the door with this big check. Look, you here's $30 million for this amazing effort that you've showed today. No one's doing that. I do that because that should be the default, that I'm doing everything I can in the time that I have, to do the best job I possibly can be, whether that be improving myself, work stuff, etc. That you shouldn't get brownie points as a professional athlete for caring. Yeah, you're a professional athlete. You should care. But like on top of that, can you give me good results? Because that's kind of what we're paying you for.
This is a results business, and the results are terrible. So we're not going to change anything, but
they're trying hard.
They're trying hard. And I'm sure the exhaustive search of Chris Drury's friends from the greater Massachusetts and New England area is going to blow us all away. And we're going to be so excited to end up with John Tortorella, or I'm trying to think what other that's probably the worst case. No, the worst case scenario is Messier. Tortorella is the second worst.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I would feel about Torts. It's like, he didn't do a stupendous job in Columbus. He didn't do a stupendous job in Philadelphia. Like, yeah, he yells at people and he cares. I mean, I'll give him that. Like, John Tortorella is one of the most outwardly spoken coaches in maybe professional sports history. Sure, I'll give him that. But what results has he gotten lately? And I understand that Columbus was a rebuilding team and Philadelphia was a rebuilding team. So the results are being, the results are skewed, and, that makes his job a lot more difficult, and the record isn't quite there. But what has he shown in the last two stops that make you think, oh, he can come back as coach of the Rangers and fix this team?
They just want someone to yell at the players. That's it. Anybody who's pounding the drum for John Tortorella is just someone who doesn't like the guys on the team and wants someone to, get their pound of flesh for it. That's all it is. I mean, it's not, again, it's not conducive with winning. No one cares about winning. Like the bullshit list of things Mark Messier put together. Nothing in there about playing good hockey. Nothing in there about being better at hockey, but identify leaders. I've watched the team, Mark. There are no leaders. There are no adults. It's a bunch of people trying to skirt accountability. And when the times are good, it's great. But when the times are bad and no one ever gets held accountable, it spirals out of control to the point that you go 5-15 and you miss the playoffs over teams like Ottawa and Montreal, who entered the season as 30-1 to win or 40-1 to win the Stanley Cup. An unequivocal disaster of a season is going to result in what? Chris Kreider getting traded and Laviolette getting fired. Okay. Maybe they win 3 more games and they're the second wild card next year. Great.
After another year of Fox and Shesterkin.
Yes, another year wasting Fox and Shesterkin.
Where have we seen that before, by the
way? God bless Ryan McDonough. 35 years old, still playing elite defense, trying very hard. For a coach who holds people accountable, who at one point this year sat Kucherov's line for a third period because they didn't try hard enough. It's crazy what happens when you're good at your job.
Magical.
You win things. Right. It must be nice. I'd like to do that someday.
Maybe one day I will.
We'll get John Cooper when he's 75 years old.
I'd rather that, because at least the accountability will still be there. It's not like it'll ever leave him. So at that point, I'd rather a 75-year-old John Cooper to coach this team. Yeah, why not? Let's do it. Get. You know what they should do? They should get Greg Popovich to come here, but he won't travel. He will just be here and hold people accountable. He's having medical, I say this half in jest because I know he has got medical issues right now, and hopefully he's okay. And I would be surprised if he were to go back and coach the Spurs again. But as a joke, Greg Popovich should be a great accountability coach. That's the new job title behind the NHL bench, is accountability coach.
I have the solution, Andrew. So the Rangers love Matt Rempe. And he's going to threaten to beat the shit out of anyone who doesn't try hard enough. And he's going to be the accountability coach. Because that way he doesn't have to play, but everyone likes him. Right. And they respect him.
Ryan
so
Reeves
you won't want
is a great accountability coach.
Ryan Reeves, who I'm not sure is in existence anymore.
Playing for Toronto right now.
I was going to say, I remember him getting waived, and then I don't remember seeing him.
They called him up for the playoffs, so...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no salary cap. That makes sense. All right, that'll do it for this very long edition of Liberty Blue. If there is any news between now and next Monday, we will attempt to get some stuff out in the meantime. Until then, I guess watch the playoffs. I don't know. Watch the Mets.
Knicks,
the Mets
baby!
are good at baseball.
Later.